and welcome to Mind Gourmet. My name is Nina Kaiser. I'm the co-founder of Mind Gourmet and, as always, your host today. My today's guest is founder of the National Institute for Integrative Healthcare and the EFT Universe, and award-winning author of Mind to Matter, the astonishing science of how your brain creates material reality, Dawson Church. Dawson, welcome!
Nina, I'm so excited to be here and to be seeing you again. Thank you for sharing this.
Yes, you're so welcome, and I think I am even more excited. And before we dive into our conversation, I will introduce you to our audience just a little bit. Dawson Church is an award-winning author whose best-selling book, The Genie in Your Genes, has been hailed by reviewers as a breakthrough in our understanding of the link between emotions and genetics. His follow-up title, Mind to Matter, reviews the science of peak mental states. Dawson founded the National Institute for Integrative Healthcare to study and implement promising evidence-based psychological and medical techniques. His groundbreaking research has been published in prestigious scientific journals. Dawson is the editor of Energy Psychology, Theory, Research and Treatment, a peer-reviewed professional journal, and he's a blogger for the Huffington Post. He shares how to apply the breakthroughs of energy psychology to health and athletic performance through EFT Universe, one of the largest alternative medicine sites on the web.
And I have fun doing all that too. Making it all fun.
So can you please tell us just a little more about your life's journey and how you actually became who you are today?
Well, I'm actually a happy person, but I never would have thought I would be saying that about myself, because when I was a child, I was very unhappy. And most of my childhood memories I just blocked out, but a few that I do remember are just miserable. And then I remember being really depressed and anxious as a teenager and looking at happy people and thinking, I don't believe it. They're not really that happy. They can't be really happy. They're just pretending. They're just masking the pain within. In the words of T.S. Eliot, they're leading lives of quiet desperation and just putting a smiley face over their misery. Then I thought, well, you know, I was on this lifetime quest to find happiness. I went into a spiritual community. I joined a spiritual community when I was 15 years old, and I meditated. I did energy healing, and over the years, I gradually recovered from all of the trauma. But I very early on, in my teenage years, saw really profound shifts in people with using energy. And so I became a writer about that, a publisher. I worked in that publishing industry for many years. And eventually I became an advocate because I realized these kinds of techniques, these kinds of treatments are so powerful, Nina. They're just exponentially more powerful than virtually anything we have in conventional medicine. So conventional medicine is great. It does things like wound healing. It does things like fighting infections superbly well. What it doesn't do very well is lifestyle diseases, chronic diseases, and stress-caused diseases. And that's where energy medicine is great. So I've become more and more of an advocate. And then with my book, first of all, the book Soul Medicine in 2004, then The Genie in Your Genes, 2006, 2007, I really became a passionate advocate for using energy techniques in your life. I also got into science in a big way. I've been involved in dozens of clinical trials, and I believe that science has so many great answers for us as we look at these kinds of techniques and what they can do for our health. So my newest book, Mind to Matter, is kind of the latest development of this whole trajectory of life experiences. And in it, I'm arguing and presenting over 400 scientific studies showing that our minds are not the source of consciousness. There's actually nothing in science that even suggests that our minds could be the source of consciousness. Our minds, in fact, are receivers and transducers of consciousness from information fields, and using our minds and then other layers of our physical reality, we then create the world around us. So that evidence, I think, is just, when I put it all together, showing how that the non-local and the energy field is actually literally creating the material universe. It just blew my mind and has been blowing the minds of many people ever since the book was published.
I am just extremely fascinated with the phenomenon of consciousness, and how we human beings, through having bodies, brains, and thus minds, how we, I don't even know if that's correct, but how we channel consciousness into our biological existence. And you actually touched on it already, but in chapter 1 you write, as the mind directs, the brain responds. When you direct your consciousness, you harness the power of your mind, activate the splendid machinery of your brain, and influence the environment around you. So there is the brain, the mind, and the consciousness. And even though they seem to overlap a lot, they are not the same. So can you give us a little more idea about what these three are and how they are related?
Yeah, well, the easiest one to define is the brain, because it sits right up here in my skull, and I know how big it is and how much it weighs and how many neurons I have and how many synaptic connections I have. Someone counted the number of synapses in the brain, which I thought was just an amazing scientific feat, and I have the number in Mind to Matter. It's something like 5 trillion. It's just a huge number of synapses and how many billions of neurons there are, as well as many billions of non-neuronal cells. So the brain is a known quantity. But what we're discovering about the brain has been so exciting over the course of the last 20 years. Like 25 years ago, if you had told the scientists that the brain changes in adulthood when people are 35, 45, 85 years old, that any well-informed neuroscientist would have told you that's impossible. Our brains do change, and there are some amazing now electron microscope videos of neurons shifting. So in one of them, I was watching on YouTube just the other day, it had impulse going through a nerve, and then as the nerve impulse went through the nerve to the nerve next door, the first nerve literally was moving at like a very rapid pace, putting out new connections, new synapses between it and the next door neuron, and within about 5 seconds, they were touching and exchanging information. So our brains are reformatting themselves all the time, and our brains are changing in response to mind and consciousness. So mind there are 2 varieties I talk about in Mind to Matter. Initially, I talk about our local minds. So you have a mind. You developed your mind over the course of your period of growing up. You went to school, and all of those things and your experiences shaped your mind and the thoughts you have in your mind. You can have a thought. You can have a thought that I live in Germany. You can have a thought that it's sunny outside today. You can have a thought that I don't believe in God. I am a sick person. All of these things are beliefs, the thoughts, the things that are the thoughts going through your mind. So the brain is the organ, the mind and the local mind is what you perceive as your own local reality. It's who I think I am. And what I talk about at the very beginning of Mind to Matter, and also at the very end, is the whole concept of non-local mind. Because our brains, our bodies, our minds, our consciousness is part of a non-local field. And that field is not limited to our local reality. It is certainly not limited to our brain. The materialist view of consciousness is that consciousness is an epiphenomenon thrown up by complex brains. So, for example, a single-celled organism like an amoeba does not have anything resembling consciousness, even though it can do all of the things a complex organism can do. It can ingest, excrete, reproduce, respire, and so on, but it clearly doesn't have consciousness in the same way. And the materialists say that as our bodies became more and more complex over the course of 4 billion years of evolution, that they eventually threw up this epiphenomenon called mind and consciousness. And so consciousness, they think, arises in the brain. And again, there's nothing in science that even remotely supports that point of view. Instead, what we find is that our brains are receivers of consciousness, and our minds, our local minds, can in fact merge with non-local mind. And in non-local mind, we're part of information fields from which our brains then extract the the material we need to function at this everyday level of local mind. And so consciousness is that sea of information in which we swim. And we can see it no more than a fish is aware of the water in which it swims. It's just obvious to the fish. It's just unconsciously there for the fish. In the same way, consciousness and these consciousness information fields are there. We're just in them all the time. We're receiving information from them. And some of the research in mind to matter shows how all of these things interact with each other, and the hard science experiments, the empirical experiments showing that this is in fact much closer to an accurate model of how the world works than the old materialist model of our consciousness and our minds being an epiphenomenon of our brains. So it's wonderful to do this, feel as though we can play, like we can leave our local mind in meditation, and we can just go and explore and be in non-local mind. Amazing things happen to the brain when we do that. One of the cool things is that, for example, right now I'm picking up some water, and we have this part of our brain called the parietal lobe, right in the middle over here. And the parietal lobe is responsible for telling us where our body ends and external objects begin. So I can pick up this water very easily. Even if I'm not looking at the water, I can pick it up because my parietal lobe is bridging information about the outside world. I can tell where my hand ends and the water container begins. That's because the parietal lobe is active and telling me that. Even with my eyes closed, I can put the water down and pick it up again. My parietal lobe is creating a map of reality that way. In deep meditation, your parietal lobe shuts down. Your parietal lobe goes offline, and your brain has no idea where you end and the non-local begins. You are one with the universe. You are one with everything. As far as your brain is concerned, you are the universe. So we can engage in these amazing mergers with non-local mind, non-local consciousness, non-local reality, and then come back from meditation, profoundly changed. So Mind to Matter is all the science about this and how it shows that we are these amazing beings able to merge our local existence with non-local reality, and then go and have fun and play with the universe and come back down to local reality and do things like podcasts.
Yeah, that's true. And it's so interesting because my analytical mind, when I go into meditation, it's always trying to figure things out. But once you become this awareness, it is so clear what it is. It's so interesting that in my perception of myself, my analytical mind just cannot grasp what it is. But once I'm there, I'm just wondering, coming back, how I could ever not have known what it is. And it happens time and time again. And before, when you were explaining, you spoke about this phenomenon, mind to matter, and we've been talking about it before, that you actually chose very carefully how you wanted to title your book, Mind to Matter, and not, as so many people say, mind over matter. And yeah, would you tell us a little bit about your thoughts regarding this? Why mind to and not mind over?
I think mind over matter is a very arrogant statement, and it implies that I'm going to formulate ideas in my mind and impose them on the material world. In the Bible, in Genesis, there's a verse that says, and God created man to have dominion over the earth. And so for many, many generations now, we've had this idea of having dominion over things outside of ourselves, of being the creators, mini gods, and then acting on the outside world. And that's what's led to things like pollution and overpopulation and resource exploitation of the earth, and the idea that we're sort of the human species, the kingpins of evolution, and we're going to make everything else be better by exploiting and controlling in that mind over matter kind of approach. And this is even found in metaphysics. People say, well, I'm going to become a meditator, I'm going to become a believer in the law of attraction, and then I'm going to have these thoughts and goals, set these aims and visions for my life. I'm going to have a vision board. I'm going to have a list of things I'd like to affirm, and then I'm going to make all these things happen. So I'm going to get the perfect wife, and the perfect husband, and the perfect place to live, and the perfect money, and all the stuff, mind over matter. And so whether it's the conquistadores in the 1500s, like Pizarro and Cortez, going and conquering the Aztecs and the Incas in Central and South America, or whether it's the New Age meditators saying, I'm going to manifest $1 million, mind over matter. It strikes me as being very arrogant, and that probably you wind up learning very painful lessons when you have intentions and they don't happen. Or they do happen. I've had times when I've really done that. I've manifested something and I got what I wanted, and it was a disaster. So I think mind to matter, it puts you outside of the flow of the universe. In mind to matter, you become one with the flow of the universe. So I talk a lot in the book about flow states, entering flow states, being one with nature, time in nature, orienting yourself to nature. And nature isn't just the birds and the bees and the grass and the trees and the river. It's also things like huge information fields. I talk in chapter 7 of Mind to Matter, and actually chapters 5, 6, and 7, about some of these fields that are measurable by geologists. They're called the Earth's field lines, and we can actually measure them. Another set of them is called the Schumann frequencies, after the scientist named Schumann who discovered them. And so there are these huge resonant fields, measurable, and they're not imaginary fields. We used to think that, things like electricity and magnetism were imaginary because we couldn't see them. We now know that they exist, even though we can't see them. In the same way, there are these massive fields in the earth, these massive electromagnetic fields, information fields, and when we orient with them, then our minds become aligned with them, and we become intelligent co-creators with those huge non-local fields. So the book is a plea to meditate, to use EFT, tapping, which is basically acupressure, to use time in nature, to use grounding, to use being sensitive and being one with nature. And in all of these ways, you then are using your individual local mind in harmony with non-local mind. You're one with non-local mind, one with this non-local consciousness. And you then are dancing in the same dance that is dancing through the tides, going up and down in water, dancing through the seasons, dancing through the migrations of insects and birds and whales and fish, and you're one with this whole huge, beautiful process of nature that we live in. So that's why I'm such a believer in mind to matter, and I don't use the term mind over matter. That implies that I have some kind of superior consciousness and superior mental ability, which is just going to set me up in conflict often with the natural rhythms of things. And a lot of the book is a plea to just relax, let go, be one with nature, and let it work its magic through you. So it's this process of mind, aligning your own mind with non-local mind, and then creation moving through you, not setting up your own local mind as being the supreme being trying to control matter around you.
So would the non-local mind be what is also called the field?
It is. It's the field, and some people think of that as God or the supreme being or the highest good. Others, like Buddhists, for example, don't think of it in terms of God or a personal God. Other people do. Hindus believe in many different gods. Christians and Jews believe in a single God. So there are ways in which people characterize these fields, either as a deity or not a deity. Me personally, my personal experience with meditation is of entering a field, and I can feel myself literally leaving my local reality and merging with this amazing non-local reality. And I don't personally perceive it as a personal God, like a man in the sky with a staff and a thunderbolt and a long white beard. That just doesn't have, that's the God I grew up with as being raised in the church. But now my experience of the universe is much more pantheistic, I suppose. I just feel one with these natural cycles, these natural rhythms, these natural fields, and they don't seem to be very, very personal, although they do seem to be highly loving. I experience this presence as being so loving that it fills me with a degree of love which I cannot even begin to comprehend or contain. I feel in meditation love just overflowing. So these information fields to me feel as though they're love of a magnitude far beyond the ability of our local minds to fully grasp.
Yeah, I experience it very similar to how you describe it. And I found this super interesting and powerful equation in your book that says mind change means field change, which means, or can mean, cell change. That sounds like a very, very empowering statement. Can you tell us more about it?
It's amazing how we are changing cells in our bodies every single second. Like I mentioned earlier about neurons and how we are wiring neurons together purely by thought. I changed my mind about the universe, I changed my mind about my body, about my life, about my circumstances, and suddenly my brain's wiring itself together in a whole different way. So it's potent. In chapter 1 of Mind to Matter, I tell the story of an astrophysicist called Graham Phillips. And he's a TV reporter in Australia. And even though he has a degree in astrophysics, he works as a TV reporter. And so he decided to learn meditation. And he went on an 8-week journey to learn mindfulness and meditation. He didn't particularly believe in it, but he wanted to see what it would do in his stressed life. And before he began, he went into a laboratory at a university called Monash University, and a biological psychologist called Richard Chamberlain and others did a complete workup on his body and his brain, a whole battery of tests, and also examining the volume of each part of his brain down to the tiniest parts of his brain. So they had a complete picture of his brain and of his body. He then began to meditate and be mindful. After 2 weeks, he felt different. He wasn't stressed. He wasn't being driven crazy by his own thoughts. After 8 weeks, he went back into the laboratory. And in only 8 weeks, Nina, several parts of his brain had increased in volume. But the part that increased the most is a part in the center of the brain called the dentate gyrus. It's a network of neurons and tendrils reaching out, and it's just responsible for coordinating emotional regulation among different brain regions. Mm-hmm. And in 8 weeks, his dentate gyrus grew by 22.8%.
Wow.
Now, a part of the brain growing by 2% in 8 weeks, that's big news. But a part of the brain growing by 22.8% in only 2 months, I mean, that is remarkable. That's an explosion of the growth of neural tissue. And so we are doing that by the quality of our thoughts, by the quality of our emotions, by the quality of our spiritual practice. We're literally reshaping our brain, and we're not doing it slowly. We are doing it moment by moment. We're doing it fast. So if you meditate, if you calm yourself, I have about 30 practices in Mind to Matter that I recommend you experiment with and then start to incorporate into your lifestyle, like meditation, like tapping, like time in nature, like grounding, like breathing, just ways of calming yourself and giving yourself a better life. But as you're doing that, you're literally producing dramatic change in your body. So that's one case of consciousness producing change in the body. And then I followed it up with a study, actually a meta-analysis of many different studies showing that meditation changes the brain. So that's just one example. I have a lot of examples there of meditation changing stem cell production. You need stem cells because the main rejuvenation cell in your body. I have studies there showing how consciousness change produces changes in DHEA, one of your main cancer-fighting and cell rejuvenation hormones in your body, how consciousness can reduce your cortisol levels. In one study I did myself of people at one of my live retreats, because I travel all over the world, I do live workshops, and in one of these week-long retreats, people's levels of cortisol, the main stress hormone, as they were meditating, as they were doing EFT tapping, their levels of cortisol declined by 37%
wow.
in just 1 week. So big shifts in hormones in your body. Their levels of immunoglobulins, which are a primary marker of immune function, their immunoglobulins rose by 113% in that same week. So cortisol down, immunoglobulins way up, more than doubling of immune function by thought alone. We didn't give them the drug. There was no surgical rerouting happening in their brains. Purely by shifting their thoughts, all of these hormones, neurotransmitters, enzymes, and other things were changing inside their body. So you are literally shifting those things moment by moment by moment by thought alone.
This is so amazing. And this is super empowering and sometimes maybe not so pleasant, but no, what I mean is it puts the responsibility in our own lap. I mean, knowing that, you can't blame anybody else or any circumstances, even not your own emotions, because, I mean, if we are capable of that, then it's our turn to, well, to think about who we want to be in our lives and to embody this. And you said before, the importance of emotions, also of thoughts, but emotions. And in Mind to Matter, you say how your emotions organize, that our emotions organize our environment and that they shape the world around us, and that there's actually a ripple effect of emotions so that they are contagious. So I think there is a jewel in here. Can you tell us more about our emotionality?
I was amazed when I began to read those studies of this phenomenon. It's called emotional contagion because it's borrowing from the whole concept of contagious diseases, that when one person in a room gets the flu and sneezes and coughs, then if there are 20 people in the room, 5 others or 8 others might get the flu as well. So in that way, diseases are contagious. Also, some ideas are contagious, and ideas sweep through through societies, sweep through the planet, sweep through a culture. But emotions are contagious. There's lots of research now on emotional contagion. But it began actually in the 1970s with the researcher who later became very famous for doing this research, worked in an office and noticed that the whole office felt better. Everyone just enjoyed each other more, got along better certain days than others. And this researcher discovered that the days when everything was really nice in the office were the days when one particular employee was out sick. Oh. So when she wasn't in the office, everyone else felt better. And they realized that this one person brought the entire emotional tone of the office down and produced contagion all around her among dozens of other people. So that led to a whole bunch of studies. And we've now shown that even mass movements in society, there's massive emotional contagion. An example that happened here in the US recently, of course, it happens in presidential elections, it happens in mass social movements. But I remember when the US Congress was having to authorize the Iraq War, and there was this like mass contagion of a sense of threat that was completely illusory. It was just not there at all in actual reality, but wound up being this, so it can produce really bad things in society when societies have mass emotional contagion. Another example is that these researchers thought they'd do a little experiment on Facebook. And so they manipulated the feeds of Facebook users to produce negative emotional contagion, just produce negative emotions in people. The contagion spread so rapidly that within a few days, it had affected 750,000 people on Facebook. Ooh. They were all producing massive emotional contagion among each other. So the people that you hang out with, the Facebook posts you read, what you retweet, what you repost, is having an effect downstream from you. And the lesson here, which I talk about in Mind to Matter, is pick good people, pick pleasant people. I had a friend who has a book coming out soon. I have a friend named Beth, and she did this when she got a diagnosis of breast cancer. And so the researchers discovered, the doctors discovered that she had a lump in her right breast, and eventually it was measured at 5 centimeters across. It was a big, big tumor. And they then looked, using scans, they looked for signs of evidence spread from the tumor elsewhere in her body. And they found that the tumor was on top of her right breast, and they found that all of the lymph nodes under her right arm were infected. They were swollen, they were red, they were full of cancer cells. And when cancer gets into your lymph system, it's like it's being in your bloodstream, and then it can travel all over your body and infect other parts of your body and spread tumors all over your body. They then found 3 spots of inflammation on her right lung. So it looked now as though the tumor was spreading to other parts of her body, including her lungs, to potentially give her lung cancer. So she got this diagnosis, a very, very serious diagnosis. And when she was in the doctor's office hearing the diagnosis, after the doctor told her this, the doctor said to her, Beth, normally we'd make an appointment for you to get radiation treatments and chemotherapy, but this is so serious, I want you to go straight from my office today to radiology for your first treatment. And Beth, to her credit, said to her oncologist, no, I need time to reflect. I need time to weigh my options. So she went and got another opinion. She called friends of hers who are knowledgeable about healing, like me. She put together a whole program for herself, and she decided to use energy techniques first. So she did intensive Qigong. We did some remote EFT tapping for her, and she cleaned up her energy field. She got rid of friendships and people that were stressing her out. She turned off all of her alerts on her cell phone. She actually turned off her cell phone most of the time. She got herself out of the negative energy of negative people in her life. She cleaned up her diet. She tweaked her exercise routine, and she gave herself a complete program of energy health in every single part of her life. So she got the diagnosis in March. By May, 2 months later, the tumor had shrunk from 5 centimeters to 1.4 centimeters. And all the lymph nodes under Beth's right armpit were clear of cancer. Just beautiful, normal cells and lymph nodes there. And she later had blood tests, and they showed no trace of cancer in her body. And again, she used energy. She focused on the energy dimension. Energy heals. Energy changes matter. You don't want to think that negative thought. You do not want to hang out with that negative person. Even if it's your family member, just find a way of putting yourself in a healthy energy environment. Occasionally you might be in a toxic environment. Like occasionally I have to go, say I go and have my annual medical at hospital, and I'm around all these sick people. After I get out of the hospital, I'll just do an energy cleanse, get rid of them all. I have a friend who's a psychiatrist in a hospital. After every patient she sees, she does an energy sweep of her body and releases all that energy. So you want to be in a healthy energy environment like Beth. Give yourself that. Don't wait till you have cancer. Do it right now, because your body is having, there's cells in our bodies that are cancerous, that are misfiring. There are genes that are not replicating accurately. Your body has wonderful ways of clearing those if your body is birthing those new cells in a positive energy field. There are 810,000 new cells that are created every second in your body. And if you're bathing them in this beautiful environment of love and compassion and kindness and beauty and humor and joy and spontaneity and being one with non-local mind and dancing with the universe, the kinds of cells that get created are happy cells.
Yeah.
And that's what you want.
And that makes total sense to be around people who are positively, emotionally contagious. And so this, if I see it correctly, relates actually to the fact that you say personal coherence, which means maybe you can explain what coherence means, but that it influences global coherence. That must have to do with this contagiousness, right? So how can we be the change we want to see in the world?
Yeah, well, what I've been fascinated by is people who are what I call master manifestors, people who just have a goal set, an aim for themselves, have a vision, have an affirmation, and those things happen. And I'm lucky because I know quite a number of those people personally who are just master manifestors. I also have known people who have beautiful visions, and their visions never manifest. They have these great grand things they want to do or see happen, and they just don't happen. What's the difference? What we find when we hook them up to EEGs is that people who are master manifestors have highly coherent brains and highly coherent bodies. Their hearts are in coherence with their heads, and their heads are in coherence bilaterally, left and right hemisphere, and also with the kinds of brain patterns that they have. So in Mind to Matter, I talk about this brainwave pattern called the awakened mind. And it's highly coherent brainwaves, also with certain ratios of brainwaves one to the other. And it's I try and make it simple. Albert Einstein said, make things as simple as possible and no simpler. And that's what Mind to Matter is. I'm trying to make all this stuff really simple, but no simpler. So I don't use a lot of big terms in the book. I try and make the book, the concepts really understandable. I tell lots of stories in the book, like stories like those of Beth. And I make the book really relatable to your own personal circumstances. But those people who are master manifestors, when we hook them up to an EEG or an MRI, they have those coherent brain waves. And in the book, I have a picture side by side of incoherent and coherent brain waves. And you look at them and they're very different. The coherent ones, they're all marching together. The incoherent ones, they're all out of phase with each other. So that's what you want to do. You want to be a meditator and meditate in a particular way that brings your brain into coherence and your heart into coherence. Then you have heart-brain coherence, and then you are fully congruent behind those things you'd like to see, vision, and create in the world.
Which again gives us the responsibility, but also it encourages us so much to really be our own creators. And there's one more thing that fascinates me that I would like to ask you, and that is, everyone loves those beautiful serendipitous moments that sometimes look like surprises or accidents. They can be very subtle or very obvious. What are actually synchronicities, and how can we entrain ourselves to experience many of these, because they are just so beautiful?
Well, people think synchronicities just happen, but it turns out, if we read the research, that some people have more synchronicities than others. And those who have more are people who believe in synchronicities. So guided initially by the work of Carl Jung, who wrote the first major book on synchronicity, I thought that chapter of Mind to Matter would be a short chapter. I thought it would be the shortest chapter in the book. I would just tell a few nice stories about synchronicities. There's no way of explaining them scientifically. I thought at the time, when I was starting out writing the book, I thought I'd just have a chapter saying, we don't understand how this stuff works, but it does happen, and here's some examples. I thought there'd be a few anecdotes, that was all in that chapter of mine. That was my plan going in. Well, that now I think is the longest chapter of the book, and it's packed with science, and the science shows that there is really good scientific evidence of how synchronicities work. So they seem mysterious, and actually they are phenomena that you actually can induce in several ways. One of them is noticing them. The more you notice them, the more you're paying attention, using your consciousness to them, and the more you tend to attract them as you do that. So the research shows that people who are paying attention to them have more of them. Also, people who believe in them have more of them. In fact, people who believe in all kinds of anomalous mental phenomena like clairvoyance, telepathy, precognition, remote healing, distant remote viewing, distant healing. People who believe in these things, the believers, have more of these experiences than the unbelievers. If you're an unbeliever, you're going to have a lot less of this, maybe none of it in your life. See, you don't get all this good stuff if you don't believe in it. If you believe in it, and that's a lot of the book too is talking about believing before you see it.
Yes.
Because you have to believe something, and you have to create all the neural circuitry to perceive that thing before it's there in the outside world. I tell one story about a woman who did this. She went to go see a practitioner friend of mine called Pat Carrington, and Pat tells a story, and she said that this woman wanted to attract a really wonderful man into her life, but she had this belief that all the good men are taken. So Pat worked with her at doing tapping, doing visualization, on this belief that all the good men are taken. And eventually, after a few sessions, this woman's belief dissolved, and she was willing to believe in the possibility of a good relationship. And Pat had her make a list of all the things she wanted in a man, in a relationship. There were like 27 things on this list. It was a long list, 27 items on the list. And the next session, the client came into Pat's office looking very happy and said, I met this guy, he's fabulous. And she said he has almost every single quality on my list. And Pat was just thrilled with for her. And to make a long story short, they wound up getting married. And they had a few sessions with Pat after the wedding. And Pat said that they were just one of the best and most compatible couples ever. So they had a long and successful marriage. But that first session after she found her future husband, Pat said to the client, Anna, where did you meet this guy? And Anna said, oh, I met Paul at work. And Pat said, well, how long have the two of you been working together? And Anna said, oh, about 6 months. And Pat said, so Anna, just in terms of the office layout, where is Paul? And Anna said, oh, he's 3 cubicles down from me. And Pat was thinking to herself, okay, Mr. Right was 3 cubicles down from her for 6 months, and she couldn't see him because of her belief that all the good men are taken. And when I say mind to matter, it's your beliefs that are creating your reality most of the time. You say, this bad thing happened, the world is this way, and I can prove it. And sure enough, all kinds of phenomena that happen in your life to prove your beliefs. But your beliefs came first, and now you're producing phenomena that reinforce them over and over and over again. When you change your beliefs about your body, about money, about your career, about spirituality, about love. Most people, like in my live workshops, I have people do a little love test and see how much love they can give and receive. Now, most people that show up in my workshops, Nina, they can give love. Most people know how to give love. Most people do not know how to receive love. They don't know how to receive love and accept it in. And so when we test them in our live workshops, they test really great for giving love, and they're terrible at receiving love. So we have to rewrite their beliefs there, rewrite the belief though, and then they can receive the love and bring it in. So it all starts with your beliefs. You have to change them in the absence of evidence, which is hard. You have only evidence that reinforces your own limiting beliefs. And now you have to believe in prosperity. You have to believe in love. You have to believe in money. You have to believe in kindness. You have to believe in a benevolent universe. But if you do that, if you have that belief and just maintain that belief regardless of outside circumstances, then that belief will tend to manifest outside of you independently once you've developed all the neural wiring to perceive Paul, who is 3 cubicles down from you and has been there for the last 6 months. I just love that story. One of many stories in Mind to Matter, but I love that particular one.
This is so fascinating. And it shows so clearly, like you described it, that it's first all about our inner state. And that's what we are in charge of. So for all our listeners who would like to find out more about you and maybe work with you or learn more from you, where can they find you and where can they go?
Well, the best place to find me is the book's website, which is mindtomatter.club, because on the book's website, you can read a couple of chapters for free. Hopefully you'll want to buy the book. And also, if you can leave me a review there as well. My goal is to get 1,000 5-star Amazon reviews, and I'm about halfway there. Okay. So that's all at mindtomatter.club. Also, if you go to that website, mindtomatter.club, and click on the live events tab, it'll put you through to live events that I'm holding or my certified trainers are holding. Because we certify and train thousands of people every year. We have practitioners who are trained in these evidence-based healing methods. They can work with you. They can work with you on any one of those life areas that's giving you trouble. You'll get a lot of resources at that mindtomatter.club link. So that's really the best place to go.
And we will link to all important places so that everybody who wants to find you can find you easily.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I could speak with you forever, but I do see that we need to close this conversation, and I feel like we are at a beautiful place to do so. So before I say goodbye, is there anything that we have not mentioned yet that needs to be said?
I think that the most useful note to close on, Nina, is just to listen to your words and your thoughts and notice any limiting ones and let them go. All of these practices have to do with letting go of our negative limiting conditioning. And you are a beautiful being meant to give and receive love, meant to be a channel of kindness and compassion and joy for those around you. My wife and I have grandchildren, and we noticed that when babies are born, when our children were born, that these babies come into the world able to give and receive love, thinking the world's a benevolent place, knowing how to play. You knew everything you needed to know when you were born. The trick now is to get back to that state of living in grace, living in beauty, living in kindness, living in love. And so it's so important that you, when you hear yourself saying that thing, I don't think I can do that, the world is hard, whatever your limiting thought or belief or word might be, catch yourself, do some tapping, let it go, and replace it with a positive belief, because that's the way you unlock your potential. How many years lie between today and the rest of your life? We have no idea. We both could be dead tomorrow. We both could live another 50 years. You just don't know. Do you want, when you finally die, to die with your potential still trapped inside, with you having listened to all the stories in your head about how I don't have a good sense of direction, I can never have that kind of marriage, that kind of prosperity is beyond me, the world's in an insecure place, and would you rather be playing those tapes for the next few years, months, days, decades till you die, and keeping your potential locked inside? Or would you rather just let go of all those limiting beliefs and find the love that's 3 cubicles away from you, find the money that is available for you, find the peace and the health and the healing that your heart deserves? And so my passion here is training people in releasing those limitations and then being the fullness of who they can be. And when you can do that, you have no idea what you might achieve. Later today, I'm interviewing someone else, and she was in hospice like when you were almost dead a while back, and that now she's bounced back. She's no longer in hospice. She's recovered completely. I mean, miracles can happen when you believe. So believe and accept, and really just be in the place to receive all the love, all the beauty, all the kindness, all the magnificence that is your birthright.
Thank you from my heart for spending this time and this place with me and our listeners. It was such a pleasure. And so I say goodbye, everybody, and always remember to take the driver's seat of this car called your life and create this lifetime to your taste. It's our pleasure here at Mind Gourmet to support you with our food for thought. Bye, Dawson, and bye, everyone.
Thank you. Many blessings. Thank you.
Thank you.